I don't know who plans these things, but you have the beauty and the grace. Now you got to listen to me. 34 years ago, my girlfriend Lori and I, we had that same call in our lives that you do. Compelled by the big idea that go, make disciples, baptize them, and teach them to obey all that I've commanded you. And we said to the Lord back in 1980, here we are, Lord, send us. And we've been living by faith since. So 34 years as missionaries. And we are grateful to all God's faithfulness. And I will tell you that this is what we looked like when we started out. You know, had a little 3-month-old boy on the front of the horse, and we were ready to go. Family grew, 4 children. We now have grandchildren. Still living by faith. Still seeing Him. And one of the things that changed for us as we became missionaries and we started receiving support, there were men and women going out and working really hard. And they were taking some of their money and they were giving it to us. And that really was a motivating factor for us, that we needed to produce something. We needed to have a return on this investment that people were giving in us. And so for all of our missionary career, we have determined to produce something. Produce some kind of fruit. So that is where we're going to talk this morning. I am the true vine. And my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, He prunes it so that it may bear more fruit. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. You know, every business has a bottom line. They have to produce something, or they go out of business. And I don't believe that we as missionaries are off the hook in producing something. And the only way to produce fruit is to prune. Now, the other thing that I am is a cherry farmer. Okay? And we had 35 cherry trees that were producing the same amount of fruit every year. So for the last year, I've been taking pictures of what we've been doing to actually produce more fruit. I apologize for all the visuals. But in order to produce fruit, sometimes it's really hard work. And it's very painful work. Many people said, do not take these trees out. They're big and beautiful, but they had reached their maturity. They were producing the same amount every year. So my son and I went to work. And it was hard work. And not only that, you have to pull up the roots, because the roots go deep. And so after having these beautiful trees, then you spend, all you're doing is planting these little sticks. Literally, that's all it is a stick you put in the ground. You know the first thing you do to that stick after you put it in the ground? The very first thing. Anybody know what you do? You take a pair of loppers and you cut it off. You cause pain to the tree. That's the only way it will start to grow. So then you begin to train the trees. This is the hard work of discipleship. This is the hard work of growing fruit. We now have 400 trees where we had 35 trees. And every one of these trees have to be trained to produce fruit. What they want to do is to grow up and produce leaves and look really pretty. That's what a tree wants to do. In order to produce fruit, it requires work. And so you have to take these branches and you have to look at the tree. You walk up to the tree and you say, now which branches are going to produce fruit and which need to come off? And you take your loppers and you prune it back. And then the ones that you want to grow fruit, you train them. This is pulling these branches down. You take a string, you drive it into the ground. That string comes up, and what you do, you pull the branch so that it's level to the ground. It exposes the top of the branch to the sun. And that creates fruit wood. So you have to do that with all 400 trees. And it's a lot of work. Discipleship is really hard work. Training people to produce food. So this is looking across after getting all the trees. Now you can see there's no leaves on these trees. So this is way in advance of the harvest. This is during that winter months when you can see, and you're the one that comes up and does the work. Then your trees, sometimes I just wanted to show Dave Miles and Dave Brooks this picture here, if I can go back one. Because sometimes you have to do a restart. This is what we call a restart in the cherry business. Sometimes there's nothing worth saving. You cut it all back and hope that it'll grow. And sometimes they die. So right in the midst, you see all the trees growing. Some trees die. Some trees stop producing fruit. And that's okay. We can plant another one. Then as the trees start to mature, you can see that everywhere that you see a bloom here has the potential to be a cherry. Every bloom can turn into a cherry. And you can see that as things start to mature, the blooms are big. But you, as the orchardist, you have to take careful attention and pay careful attention to every tree. You see, inside of that is a sucker starting to suck energy, but it's hidden. You can't see it. You have to go to work, and the enemy is just like that. He puts these hidden things in our lives that will take energy and cause us to not produce fruit. As the orchardist, that's your job. So you got to find them. Sometimes trees get eaten by the enemy. This is a deer that came through my orchard. Everywhere that deer chews on my tree, those branches will no longer produce anything. So what did we do? That deer is now in the freezer. Okay? So we're eating cherry venison. That's what we call it. Because it's just payback. That's where you have to be ruthless about things like this. Okay? Here are the tools of the orchardist. You see this tree? This is an apricot tree. And everything on the ground under that tree grew in 1 year. You know, we call those branches on the ground. Who knows what those are? Suckers. Suckers grow beautiful leaves, but they don't produce fruit. And you have to prune that tree every year, or those suckers will take over. And they suck all the energy out of the tree. These are the tools to grow fruit. There's no other way. You gather up all the ones that aren't going to produce fruit and you burn them, just as the Scripture says. And then the fruit starts coming up. Now look at that. Some people might look and say, wow, look at all that fruit. You know, that's a cluster of apricots. That's because the tree, the pruning process tells the tree, I'm going to die. Somebody is taking loppers to me. Somebody is taking a chainsaw to me. I have to produce fruit or I'm going to die. So they produce this cluster of apricots. Now if you leave those apricots just like that, they will never mature because there's no room for them to grow. They will never mature, become a tasty fruit, and their seed will never produce another tree. So you have to then thin the tree. So in that same spot, you have to give room for this fruit to grow. And on the ground, you'll see that there are thousands of apricots that you just toss on the ground. And I'm telling you, when you first start doing this, it's hard to do because you want this fruit. But if you leave all that fruit on the tree, at the end of that day, you'll have nothing because the fruit won't mature. There's Lori doesn't get paid, but she does a great job of thinning the trees. But then you do all this work, and here are all these beautiful trees. Look at this one here. Just died. And you don't know why. I even tried duct tape. See? It just died. And that's okay. Sometimes you got to shake the dust off your feet and move on. Plant another tree. Then the fruit begins to grow. It starts to mature. And then this may be the most important picture of all. I think that this is a picture of missionary work. Because sometimes all you're going to be is the prop pole for the fruit bearers. When we go out and actually do discipleship, the ones that produce fruit, the fruit can get so heavy that if you don't prop up the branch, it will break. And that fruit-bearing branch is lost. So you have to go and you have to strategically prop up these branches that are holding the fruit that becomes heavy. Otherwise, you'll lose it. And I see that as my role. I've got to find those national leaders or the leaders in my community that are going to produce fruit in places I can never produce fruit. And then how do I keep them in the game? How do I help them stay in the game? And so here's that apricot tree now. You can see it starting to produce. We have to prop it up. It's getting heavy. It's time for harvest. The cherries are all growing. I mean, literally the day before coming here, I finished harvesting our cherries, picking them. And all that work now is paid off. You do the same thing with raspberries. Here's Lori. Every morning she goes out and picks all of these raspberries. Every morning, that and more. And the only reason, because we pruned the raspberries. We cut out the old canes and made room for the new canes to grow. And it's nothing but work if you want to have a harvest. So now it's harvest time where we live. And the fruit, the cherries, the apricots. If you want fruit, this is what you have to do. And I'm going to say just a couple more things that the Lord has been telling me. You don't get to prune yourself. Okay? You got to let somebody prune your life. And if we want to continue to grow fruit and produce fruit, we don't grow the tree of CRM. And for us to go on and produce fruit, we're going to have to prune not only ourselves, but our collectives. And we have to be ruthless about it. Interchange, Church Next, Beta, Ethne, Conex Partners, CRM, the board, Norris, and it's going to require a lot of hard work. Because our job to glorify God is to bear more fruit. It's not to grow beautiful trees. And whatever is not bearing fruit, we have to be ruthless. And guess what? Nobody likes to be pruned. The tree doesn't like it. I don't like it. But that's the only way to get to the harvest, is to allow yourself to be pruned, to have somebody speak into your life and say, what about this? What about this? What about this? What can you stop doing? What can you start doing? And if we want to have fruit, we've got to be willing to be pruned. As an organization, as individuals, because that's what we're here to do in this mission world, is to go, make disciples, baptize them, and teach them to obey all that I command. And everything that gets in the way of that, we've got to be willing to cut away as an organization and as individuals. I'm just a cherry farmer, though.